Are the cracks in the UFC starting to show? This is what we're going to discuss in today's video. After, I think, the last few weeks, it's key to understand what's going on, why so many fighters have come out in the media, ex-fighters, current fighters come out in the media about pay, and what is likely to happen in the future. And just for context, so really the massive thing that started this all off was Conor Benn being signed by Zuffa Boxing, who is controlled by Dana White at current, funded by Turki Al-Sheikh along with TKO, and they've paid Conor Benn, who is in a sense a household name from the Eubank fights, but isn't a star compared to some of the current UFC fighters, £15 million for a one-fight contract with Zuffa Boxing, which will go away from Eddie Hearn. We'll get into Eddie, we'll get into the UFC fighters, but really, let's take it back. I think there's always been a problem with UFC pay and UFC fighters realising that boxing get paid so much more with a similar amount per event revenue, and basically the percentage of revenue for fighters, boxing versus UFC is massively different and massively lower than the UFC, and this has been going on for years. This isn't new. I think the key thing is that Dana White is heavily now involved with boxing, and isn't just heavily involved with boxing, is paying the ridiculous amounts of money to boxers as per what other boxing promoters were doing. He is now front and centre involved with that payment. And so yes, of course, if you have two people in your company under an umbrella parent company, Dana White is involved with both companies, running both the UFC and Zuffa Boxing, and you say, Conor Benn, you are not a world champion, you never have been, here is $15 million for one fight, Tom Aspinall, Alex Pereira, John Jones, there's no $15 million for you. Conor McGregor, if you want to come back and it would be a great fight and it would sell millions more than a Conor Benn fight that he's going to be next in, yeah, Conor, you'll never see $15 million from us. Or you may see $15 million, but actually, Conor, you're probably worth 4 times more than that, and we could never give it to you. This is the key problem, and this goes from, we're talking about the heights of stars in the sport, but really that trickles down totally. A Conor Benn, never been world champion, never been, he is a star though, he is known, he is well known in certain aspects from the 2 Eubank fights, so yeah, okay, he is worth probably more than a champion who you wouldn't know outside of the UFC hardcore fans, but you're telling me a Sean O'Malley, you're telling me a Francis Ngannou, you're telling me them type of people, Francis isn't with the UFC, but you tell me, Tom Aspinall isn't worth $15 million per fight. I can tell you this, Tom Aspinall is nowhere near getting paid $15 million per fight. Key from the Tom Aspinall and Eddie Hearn interviews where they've literally laughed at his contract, of how much he brings in for a show and how much he gets out of it is apparently just totally different from, I think Eddie or someone in one of these interviews, please go have a look, said something like it was a tenth of what he would earn in boxing. 10% of what we're doing in boxing per fight, which is, yes, it's probably exaggerated because Eddie Hearn obviously lost Conor Benn, and this is part of the story, and now he's signed Tom Aspinall to his talent agency, so he'll be in negotiations with Dana White around Tom Aspinall's upcoming contracts and things like that, so that's a real massive play from Eddie, getting involved with that, looking at contracts and getting involved to really stick it to Dana after he signed Conor Benn. And I do think this is a real problem. I think this is partially the reason why you've seen worse and worse cards year on year. I think them top tier cards you see every so often were much more common in years past in everyone's view. And the White House card has really coincided with this problem. You've had a White House card that Donald Trump, the President of the United States, said, I want a card at the White House. A card like no one has ever seen. Dana White goes, yeah, okay, fine, I've signed up to it. I'm going to do, it could be, when he's asked early on, look at this, honestly, look, months ago when it first got announced, look at an interview with Dana White where he gets asked about this card. He's talking John Jones, he's talking McGregor, he's talking everyone under the sun. He's in every superstar fight possible on the same card. That is, that isn't an exaggeration. Literally being asked, yeah, sure, John Jones, yeah, tick. McGregor. Oh, would you see John Jones and McGregor on the same card for the White House? Who knows? Anything's possible for this card. We then get it announced, and we've got you've got Pereira versus Garn, which is decent enough, but you've got no John Jones on there, who would be a bigger fight against Pereira. You've got Topuria and Gaethje headlining the card. What's that? That's not even a star fight. Who knows Gaethje outside of UFC hardcore fans? I don't know. The type of people you're trying to push this onto is really people who've not seen UFC ever before. Gaethje? Really? Topuria, yes. But against Makhachev? Yeah, that could headline the card. Having that as a headline is crazy to me. The rumours are Gaethje got asked about this fight a few days before, going, you're not on the White House card, you're not on it, and then suddenly you are, because clearly someone pulled out of that fight, and I'm guessing it'd be Makhachev. And even Tiburia's come back and said, look, I had to negotiate several times and I wasn't going to do it because of money. He renegotiated, he got offered something, like, no, not for that amount of money. John Jones apparently never considered for the card, but months ago when it was first announced, apparently he was going to be the main guy and was definitely odds on to be on that card. And look, if you had John Jones in that against Alex Pereira and Topuria versus Makhachev, would it be the best card ever? Hey, look, it's getting up there. Definitely getting up there. So, look, that is the key problem here. They aren't willing to spend the money, but on Zuffa Boxing, they totally are. And again, they have got massive funding from Turkey Al Sheikh, but when you've got the guy who's running the show is basically calling the shots for the company, it becomes a real problem when you pay two different, and not employees, but two people you contract out to make money, to make an event. The events could be the same. The events could make £100 million each. But clearly in the UFC, I would guess from what has been heard from Eddie and Tom Aspinall, who really is probably one of the younger people, you've really heard what sort of level of difference there is between a boxing salary and at UFC, and you've heard rumbling before, but they're saying 10%. 10% might be extreme. It might be exaggerated because they're saying, look, Thomas will earn probably more than what he actually could in boxing. But to be that far out, I think you've got to at least be 5 times. There has to be a major difference for the amount of people that is coming out and saying this is a massive problem. And clearly, I'm contacting Eddie Hearn to go, you are now representing Tom Aspinall, represent me, look at my contract, help me. And look, this is a question to Dana in every press conference he goes to now. It has never been bigger about the pay difference between boxing and the UFC. Clearly, and the only issue with this is that Dana has started going into boxing and paying the ludicrous amounts of money to people who really don't sell less than current UFC stars. So where does this leave the UFC? I think it leaves it where it's been directing itself for the last couple of years. It's going to start losing stars. It's going to start losing stars to Netflix, to Jake Paul, to these type of people who've got money to spend, and yes, may not spend massively more than you, maybe a little bit, maybe double, but again, the show will probably allow that, the amount of revenue will probably allow that, but also, the fighters are that annoyed, or that, looking at the different amounts you can receive, and going, I'm not happy at all. I could go over here, and yes, it may not be for the UFC title that I've always dreamed of. It might not be for against the massive stars every fight. It may just be for one fight, but this one fight could earn me what I could in 6-7 title title fights, because Netflix seem to be paying a premium. I fully expect they are above what naturally even boxing would, to get these stars on there to cause a problem. And look, Ronda Rousey coming out against the UFC about pay and how bad it is a massive nail into the UFC reputation. Ronda Rousey was poster star of the UFC for ages. The reason female fighting came into the UFC. And now you've got to come out going, yeah, fighter pay's ridiculous, it needs to be sold in them sort of terms. You've got Francis Ngannou going off, and look, there's other things probably going on there from both sides, but clearly isn't happy with the pay. Tom Aspinall is nearer the door than we've ever seen.
Well, we've been talking about that jab and his
fighters, they're not nobodies, they're not top 15, they are the champions of their divisions going, we are not happy with the money we're receiving. And you only need a few of those to start leaving and start going to a Netflix before Netflix or Jake Paul or whoever works with a Netflix to do MMA fights to start going, we can make a business out of this, because we don't actually, for a few years, we can take less of a profit margin than the UFC. And yes, they won't take UFC's place for years to come. The UFC is massive and has massive funding behind it, and massive funding from grassroots MMA all the way to where the top tier MMA talent is, and it's still going to be in the UFC for many years. But look, them champions, I think, to be honest, Jake Paul, Netflix, and the funding behind that project will start going. If they start hearing rumours that everyone's not happy, right, wait till their contract ends, wait till they start getting close to their contract, and let's have a talk. Because, to be honest, as long as you're willing to not make as much money, which clearly the UFC is making incredible money out of these events, as long as you can reduce your margin, your profit margin on those fights for a few years, you can start getting into that. Because guess what? The fighters are annoyed enough where they are happy, I would say happy not to sign a contract. I see contract for yeah, as a, he won't be in the UFC after that. I can't see him being in the UFC after that. I can't see the way he's been treated and the amount he gets paid, and Eddie now in his ear going, you can do X, Y, Z, and clearly getting him massive advertising deals and things like that, which Eddie Hearn has talked about on interviews, how he wouldn't consider going elsewhere into boxing or even into a Jake Paul Netflixy type fight, and you've got Francis Ngannou there, which would be the biggest star fight of Tom Aspinall's career, because the UFC can't seem to make the fight of John Jones, Aspinall, Pereira, Aspinall, and has really. And I know Dana says he hasn't, but he has. If you ask anyone, has Dana prepped with his injury correctly in interviews? I would say not. Totally not. He's had a massive injury, and it's been played down massively by the top guy in the UFC, Dana White, clearly in interviews, and he says, no I haven't now, but that has only come out post him realising he signed with Eddie Hearn, and that is a vulnerable position to be in, and UFC is not got 100% control of Tom Aspinall's future anymore, because that heavyweight division is weak, accurate, very weak. And yes, you may be chucking Pereira in there. Look, Pereira will retire at some point, and if he is again a massive fight, if you can't give him Aspinall, if you can't give him Jones, if you can't give him Ngannou, you can't give him the star, and you can't give him the star money fights, that give him that generational wealth, he will go as well, or he will retire. It's either one. I mean, Pereira's been in the game, kickboxing, and then in the UFC for years now. There will be a point where he retires, and I don't think that'll be too far off. So look, they are in a bad position in the UFC. I think UFC is in the weakest position they've been in for a good few years, and it's actually when they seem to have the most money and power, or should have the most power since their beginning. There's no real competition in MMA anymore. compared to the UFC. Everyone uses everything else as a stepping stone to get into the UFC, and then they've just signed a billions of pound Paramount deal, which is huge. So they've got more money than ever. Everyone wants to see UFC more than ever. Paramount are going to do it as a, it's going to be on their subscription, sort of like a Netflix subscription, monthly payment. The UFC will be mostly free. That means for America, which basically means that more eyes are going to be on the UFC than ever before, which is incredible for the UFC. It's a better position the UFC has been in years, and people are going to see the UFC and their stars more than ever. And actually, Dana White, I want to put this very clear, Dana White getting into boxing is going to cause cracks in the UFC and cause the UFC to be weaker than ever, because it's just going to annoy fighters. Fighters are going to start realising that no matter what, it's not just boxing that is the crazy part of it. If you put UFC, the people who are running it, into boxing, in a sense what has happened, they will pay the money, and so what it means is you are actually worth the money. It's just we have a majority control of MMA, and you cannot go anywhere else to get even the level of money you're getting, which I think will totally change soon. I think you've got Eddie Hearn looking to fire shots and to cause problems. You've got Jake Paul taking on Ronda Rousey. You've got Francis Ngannou going over there, where they're clearly getting paid very nicely for it, for retired fighters being Ronda Rousey, and that's a problem. And I think also the cards are getting worse than ever. If you put Taskmaster against Ngannou on the top of a fight card, it smashes out the water that White House card. I'll say it now. If you put a few good fights below that, you could easily find them by giving them the amount of money they actually deserve, and that will be the first massive sledgehammer through the wall at the UFC, because they'll have to start competing. And look, in the next few years, I think we'll get better fight cards than we ever have before, because there's going to be big competition for the UFC, and look, they have caused it themselves. So let me know what you think in the comments down below about this topic. I think, look, this is going to be incredible to see. Great to see competition in MMA again. It may cause the UFC to push on, and at least we'll see better cards if it's in the UFC or outside the UFC, and we'll see the fights we want to see, and basically what happened in boxing. Now there'll be more competition. That will cause people to have to compete and make people want to watch their card compared to another company's card. So let me know what you think in the comments down below, like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.